Hello everyone, welcome to Simply Current Affairs. I am Naveen Kumar. I will be discussing today's daily answer writing challenge topic. Right? Before going to today's topic, we will discuss yesterday's question, model answer and the best paper. So yesterday's question is about electoral reforms. Right? So what is the question? Examine the need for electoral reforms as suggested by various committees with particular reference to the one nation, one election principle. Right? So how to approach this answer? Before approaching this answer, one thing that we should keep in mind is this question asks us to examine the need. Okay? So many students have made some mistakes related to this. I will explain. Okay? So how to write an introduction for this question? So the overall question is electoral reforms, right? The need for electoral reforms. So in the introduction, you should touch upon the need for electoral reforms. Why is it necessary? That should be the introduction, right? Don't bring one nation, one election, the advantages, disadvantages, the committees that we have established to bring electoral reforms, no need to mention them in the introduction, right? Because since it is a 10 marker, just confine your intro to the electoral reforms. What do we understand by electoral reforms and why is it necessary? That alone is sufficient, right? We can just briefly mention what is electoral reforms, right? Its objective is to establish fair and transparent electoral process. Something like that you can write on your own. Coming to the body, see, this question is about examine the need for electoral reforms. What does it mean? We have to establish, we have to convey the examiner that currently there are some needs for electoral reforms. In the electoral process, some changes has to be done. We have to examine those needs. Okay, we have to bring out those needs. This question is not about listing down the various committees and their recommendations. Right? We should not list down the various committees and their recommendations related to electoral reforms. We have to say currently there are these electoral reforms that we have to do, and to substantiate that we can give those committees, okay, give the recommendation of those committees to substantiate our points. We should not just simply mention 1, this committee, 2, this committee, 3, this committee. We should not write like that. We have to examine, we have to bring out the necessity of electoral reforms. To substantiate our point, we can mention the suggestions given by those committees. Right? For example, say there is an increasing trend towards criminalization of politics. Right? To address this, we need to implement reform, say Dinesh Goswami committee or Indrajit Gupta committee, whatever it is. We can mention they have recommended it, we can implement to address this. This is how we have to write. Say there is a huge money power currently in electoral process. We have to address this by moving towards public funding of elections as suggested by this so-and-so committee. Like this we have to write. We have to examine the need. We have to establish the need for electoral reforms. Right? So we can mention 2 or 3 points like this. Then we have to go to the next part, that is one nation, one election. Keep it in mind, it is mentioning particular reference to one nation, one election. The whole answer should not be sticking only to the one nation, one election principle. First we have to cover a broader electoral reforms, then we can come to this one nation, one election principle. So we can write former President Ramnath Kovind committee, about the committee, right? Then we can mention, briefly mention what is one nation, one election. We know what is that, right? Simultaneously conducting elections for Lok Sabha, state legislature and local bodies also are included, right? We can just simply give a very simple definition for that, and we can briefly mention the advantages of one nation, one election, right? We can simply mention very briefly some of the advantages of one nation, one election if we implement it, right? But remember, this is a very contentious issue. One nation, one election is a very contentious issue. Many states are opposing, right? So we should cover the challenges, okay, challenges of one nation, one election very briefly. 1 or 2 lines we can mention the challenges. Then we can go to the conclusion. How to write the conclusion? In the conclusion, don't focus only on the one nation, one election. That is not the only topic that we are discussing here. Our comprehensive holistic topic is electoral reforms. In conclusion, we have to address the electoral reforms, and we can mention about how one nation, one election can complement these reforms. Right? That is how we have to complete the conclusion. In the entire body, don't stick to only the one nation, one election. Cover the electoral reforms comprehensively, then talk about how one nation, one election can supplement these reforms. Right? So this should be the broad structure, how you can structurize this answer. Right? Let us see one model answer for this. So here we have, as we discussed before, we have spoken about definition of electoral reforms. Why is it necessary in India to ensure free and fair, transparent elections, right? Next, we can go to need for electoral reforms. We have to examine the need, right? We have to bring out what is the need, and to substantiate our point, we can mention the committee's name. It is always better to mention the year. Okay, it is always very much better to mention the years of the committees which was established, right? So we are bringing out 3 needs. In addition to that, we are also mentioning the committee's name. This committee said this committee said that. See, if it is listing down, most of the answer which we saw today have written for list down the various, if there is a question, imagine there is a question asked by UPSC that is asking us to list down the recommendation of various committees towards electoral reforms. Your answers would be correct. Most of the answers would be correct. What they have mentioned, they have written some introduction. 1. Dinesh Goswami committee established and they recommended this. Indrajita Gupta committee recommended this. Right? Like that, many aspirants have written like this. If the question was about listing down the recommendations, it is correct. Right? But the question here is examine the need. Your points are well and valid, but change it according to the demands of the question. That is the only thing that you have to do. Right? Then we can talk about the one nation, one election. What is that? And we are coming to the potential benefits. If it is implemented, these are the benefits that might occur. Also, as we discussed before, you have to mention the challenges, because since it is a very contentious issue, several states are not opposing this, right? So we have to mention that. And conclusion, overall electoral reforms and how simultaneous election can supplement this, right? This is how we can approach this answer. So it was very difficult for us to filter the top 20 papers today. I think we will probably post around 14 to 15 papers only, because most of the aspirants have written like the listing down of the various committees, right? They have not addressed the actual demand of the question. So we'll be posting around 14 to 15 papers, evaluated papers. Out of the papers which we shortlisted, this is a very excellent paper. Vaishnavi, this is from Vaishnavi. She has written a very good answer. We will discuss that. In the intro, she is talking about free and fair elections, our foundation for representative democracy. Yes. However, growing political finance and frequent elections shows the need for electoral reforms, which, okay, it is little bit unidimensional. We are saying that all these issues can be addressed by one nation, one election, right? This is very extreme kind of statement. It can be even more balanced, right? So we can cover the overall electoral reforms, and we can briefly mention about one nation, one election, or simply we can bring it to the body of the answer. We can just talk about electoral reforms here, right? In the body, she has written very well. See, she has established the need. She has examined the need. Okay, criminalization of politics. She is also giving recommendations of a committee, right? This is how we can approach the answer. She is talking about money power. She is substantiating that point using the Dinesh Goswami committee. She is talking about political instability and how the election commission in 2015 gave a recommendation towards this, right? So this is a very balanced answer. So she is also talking about misuse of social media, frequent elections. Then she is connecting it with the one nation, one election, simultaneous election, which is good. So here are advantages or potential benefits. Some subheadings can be mentioned, right? I mentioned some subheadings, and these points are very fair. Also, we are mentioning about limitations, right? So in the conclusion, there is some changes which can be done. See here, She has mentioned one nation, one election can be useful, but it should adapt through federal consensus. See, this is very unidimensional. Okay. In the conclusion, we are only talking about the one nation, one election. The question is about overall electoral reforms, right? We have to address the topic holistically in conclusion. Also, we can talk about simultaneous election. Don't stick only to the one nation, one election. That is the only feedback. Apart from that, it is very good. This is a very good answer. Fine. Okay, we'll go to day 8 topic, which is related to left-wing extremism, right? So before discussing the question, we will discuss the topic, then we will discuss the question, how to approach this question. Okay, first, what do we understand by left-wing extremism? For about 60 years, okay, for about 6 decades, 60 years, left-wing extremism is one of the most crucial, most dangerous internal security threat in India, right? So we have to understand some origin, some ideological backing, how it grew, right? And the present status of left-wing extremism in India, also along with the government measures taken to curb this left-wing extremism, right? So we will start with the origin of left-wing extremism, how it started, right? So the left-wing extremism in India can be traced to the 1967 Naxalbari uprising which happened in West Bengal. Right, in 1967 in West Bengal, a armed peasant rebellion went place. Okay, it is an armed peasant revolt against the feudal landlords. So what happened? Because of exploitation of the farmers, of the peasants, or the landless farmers, due to exploitation, due to forced eviction, right? Due to forced labor, they carried an armed rebellion against the feudal landlords. So, led by leaders such as Charu Majumdar, Kanu Sanyal, right? These were some of the leaders who led this Naxalbari uprising, right? As we discussed before, it is a armed peasant rebellion. So what is the ideology behind this left-wing extremism in India? They were inspired by the Maoist ideology of Mao Zedong. Who is Mao Zedong? Former leader of China. Right? What is the Maoist principle? So, Mao Zedong believed in mass mobilization and armed rebellion to overthrow the state and establish a communist form of government. Okay, they believed in armed rebellion and mass mobilization of people, particularly peasants, to overthrow the government and establish a particular form of communist form of government. Right? It is a Maoist ideology. So, left-wing extremism, particularly the Naxalbari uprising, took inspiration from this ideology and they wanted to overthrow the Indian government and establish a communist form of government. This is the ideological backing of the left-wing extremism in India. Right? So, started in 1967, it started growing in many parts of the country. Right? A particular event was in 2014. Several extremist groups were merged under the Communist Party of India, Maoist, CPIM. Okay, this is a banned party in India. So many extremist party united under the Communist Party of India, Maoist, to overthrow the government of India and establish a communist form of government. Right? So it started growing in many parts of the country, particularly what we call as red corridor, right? What is red corridors? States which were affected by left-wing extremism. Which states were affected by this? Particularly Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, West Bengal, right? Even Madhya Pradesh, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh. These are the few states which were very affected by the left-wing extremism. Even Kerala, right? So they were ideologically affected by the left-wing extremism. Right? So it became a huge threat that in 2009, The government headed by former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh said that left-wing extremism is the greatest security threat for India. Right? So it became such a huge threat. For example, in 2010, in only that one particular year, there were more than 1,000 casualties due to Naxal related incidents. So what is Naxalism? So left-wing extremism is also called Naxalism. The word is originated from this Naxalbari uprising, right? So because of this Naxalbari uprising, it is also known as Naxalism in India. It is used interchangeably, right? So as we discussed, it went as a biggest threat for India, right? It became a huge threat for India. How the Indian government adopted a multi-pronged approach to address this threat. Right, there are broadly three categories of measures that was taken by the government. Right, the first is security related initiatives. What are this? For example, in 2015, the government came up with a national policy and action plan to address this threat, address the left-wing extremism threat. What is this? This is a holistic policy which were trying to address the left-wing extremism, right? It is the holistic policy that Indian government brought in to address this threat. What are the other security measures? The Indian government of India started deploying so many CAPF forces, particularly specialized forces such as Cobra, Greyhounds, right? Jaguar from Jharkhand, right? These are all the specialized forces exclusively to combat this issue of left-wing extremism, right? So these are so even now we have started utilizing UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, and satellite imagery, right? These technological inputs were also being used to address this threat of left-wing extremism. What is the second part? Developmental measures. See, this has been a huge threat for 60 years, but why is this a huge threat and why people are driven towards left-wing extremism? One of the main reasons is the feeling of deprivation, right, among people. People started feeling that we are not getting sufficient from the state, right? We are being exploited and we are not getting sufficient facilities from the state, sufficient services from the state, right? There was a feeling of deprivation which pushed people towards this extremist ideologies, right? To address this feeling of deprivation, the government started building up several developmental initiatives. What are those? Building up schools, roads, establishing telecom connectivity, establishing internet connectivity, right? Skill development, bringing in new employment opportunities, right? All these measures holistically try to address the deprivation factor, right? And stop people from moving towards the left-wing extremism ideologies, right? The third very important part is community participation and rehabilitation. Okay, so what is this? Under this, very many number of surrender policies were brought in by the government. What are they? Say, those who are previously involved in Naxalism related activities want to lay down their arms and surrender. Under these surrender policies, they can do so and the government will provide financial incentives for them, right? In addition to financial incentives, employment opportunities would be given, skill development would be given, livelihood opportunities would be given, right? Everything would be given to help them to enter into the mainstream society, right? So surrender policies is a major part of this multi-pronged approach. In addition to this, community policing, right? Youth engagement, these are all comes under the community and rehabilitation factors, right? So this is the three categories where government focused on. So, okay, these steps were taken by the government. What are the results? See, around 2014, there were around 126 districts that were left-wing extremism affected. Okay, there were more than 100 districts which were affected by left-wing extremism. Recently, in March 2026, the government has announced that this has come to 0. Okay, now left-wing extremism affected states have come to 0, and the government claims that India is effectively free from Naxalism. Okay, we are effectively free from Naxalism. Right, there are minor incidents here and there, but the government is taking efforts to stop that also. Right, for example, the fatalities, the number of violent incidents, everything has come down drastically. Right, the government now focusing on consolidating the gains and preventing the ideology from coming back into the mainstream again. Right, we are in the process of consolidating these gains. Right, so how to consolidate these gains? Just by neutralizing the personnel involved in the Naxalism, just by neutralizing the top commanders, is it possible to completely eradicate this? No. As we discussed before, the complete eradication starts from addressing the deprivation factor. Right? People should not feel deprived. Only the deprivation factor pushes the people towards the Naxalism, left-wing extremism, or whatever extremist ideologies. Right? So the government should focus on addressing this deprivation and start building a trust between the institutions and the people. Only then in the long run this can be eradicated. Right? Fine. We have discussed the topic related to left-wing extremism. We will see the UPSC question related to this. See, it is a 2025 question, very recently asked question. It is about the government of India recently stated that left-wing extremism will be eliminated by 2026. Yes. What do you understand by left-wing extremism? How are the people affected? What measures have been taken by the government? Right. See, there are 3 sub parts in this question, but it is a 10 marker. So you should allocate the space effectively. Right. So what you can do in the introduction, you can say what is left-wing extremism. Right. What do we understand by left-wing extremism? And we can briefly mention the impacts of the left-wing extremism very briefly. Right. In 1 or 1.5 lines we can mention. Right. Then we have to go focus on the second part, which is how are people affected. Right. What are the impacts of, okay, this is asked in the as a separate question, so we can bring the impacts in the second part. In the introduction, we can just simply mention about the left-wing extremism. Then we can come to the second part where we will be talking about how people are affected. Right. In the last part, in the third part, we can talk about the government measures taken to address this left-wing extremism. Right. There are 3 subdivisions. Okay. Address all the parts of the question. Right. And then have a balanced conclusion. Like we discussed, right? Just now we discussed. Like that, we can mention some holistic balanced conclusion. That would do. Right. So we have discussed the left-wing extremism topic, and this is a question for today. Right. So please make sure to send your answers before 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Right. Thank you everyone. Bye.